wedding dress fitting ended in tears. It all started when my fiancé's sister walked out of the dressing room, wearing my gown. She spun around, smiling sweetly, and whispered, "This should have been mine." My fiancé stared at her, clearly impressed. "Wow, it really suits you," he said. My hands trembled. I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm. "You like it?" I asked with a smile. She smirked. I leaned in and whispered, "Then you're going to love what's coming next." And right on cue, the boutique doors flew open. But let's rewind for a moment. I got engaged to my fiancé, Daniel. After 5 years together, he wasn't the most romantic guy in the world, but he was reliable, steady, and I genuinely believed he loved me. After waiting so long for the proposal, I didn't question it. I just said yes. Planning the wedding was overwhelming, but the one thing I was truly excited for was the dress. I'd never been the type to dream about weddings as a kid, but when I found the dress, I finally understood why people got emotional over this stuff. It was perfect. An elegant lace mermaid gown that fit me like a dream. I cried when I put it on. My mom cried. Even my best friend, who never cried, got misty-eyed. It was my dress. Or, it was supposed to be. Then Daniel's sister, Sarah, decided it was hers. Sarah had always been oddly competitive with me. If I got a promotion, suddenly she had huge career news. If Daniel and I planned a vacation, she'd coincidentally post about an even fancier trip. Whenever I shared a sweet couple's photo, she'd upload one that looked even more romantic with whatever guy she was seeing at the time. It was exhausting. She clearly didn't like me, but also couldn't stand to be left out. At first, I thought she was just insecure, but eventually it became obvious she didn't want to be part of my life. She wanted to be me. So I didn't involve her in the wedding planning. She complained to Daniel, of course, but I stood firm. She wasn't a bridesmaid, and frankly I wasn't excited to have her there as a guest, either. I knew she'd find a way to make the day about her. And as it turns out, I was right, but I had no idea just how far she'd go. On the day of the fitting, I was at the bridal boutique with my mom, maid of honor, and a couple of close friends. The appointment was private, just how I wanted it. Then Daniel showed up. With Sarah. I hadn't invited him, and he'd never shown much interest in wedding planning before. I was confused and tense. Sarah walked in like she owned the place. My stomach dropped, but I smiled politely. "Oh hey, didn't know you were coming." Daniel smiled back, casual as ever. Sarah just wanted to see the dress. I wasn't thrilled, but I wasn't going to start a scene during my fitting. I assumed she'd peek, give a few comments and leave. I was so wrong. The assistant brought out my gown. Just seeing it made my heart race, but before I could even touch it, Sarah grabbed, not in a let me admire it kind of way. She took it, and walked straight into the dressing room. I froze. My mom's jaw dropped. My best friend made a choked sound. "What the heck?" I blurted. Daniel just shrugged. "She just wants to see how it looks," he said, like it was nothing. "She's not the bride," I snapped. My pulse was pounding. "That's my dress." Before I could storm in there and take it back, the curtain flew open. Sarah stepped out, wearing my wedding gown. She twirled, running her hands along the fabric like she'd just won something. Then she looked at Daniel, and Daniel, he said, "Wow, it really suits you." For a moment, everything went still. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Sarah looked at me, eyes filled with smug satisfaction. Then she said it. "It should have been me." My body went cold. She really thought she'd stolen something from me. I gave her a slow, sweet smile, took a step closer. "You like it?" I asked. She grinned. "I do." I leaned in, close enough to smell her perfume. "Then you're really going to love what's next." Right on cue, the boutique doors burst open. A tall, elegant woman stormed in, holding a baby in her arms. She didn't look at me. She was staring straight at Daniel. "You have got to be kidding me," she snapped. Daniel froze. Sarah stiffened. The woman marched up to him, fury in her eyes. "You're here playing dress up while ignoring my calls about your daughter?" The room exploded. My mom gasped. My best friend stared in shock. Even the boutique assistant looked like she wanted to vanish. I felt the ground shift under my feet, and just like that, everything changed. I spoke, my voice oddly calm. The woman finally turned to look at me. "You didn't know, did you?" she said, laughing bitterly. "Of course not. He's been avoiding me for weeks." She adjusted the baby in her arms. "This is your fiancé's child," She's 2 months old. I swear. I stopped breathing. My ears rang. Daniel, my fiancé, had a child. A whole baby. And Sarah knew. That's why she'd been acting so smug. She thought she'd won. The room felt like it had been struck by lightning. No one spoke. No one moved. Daniel's face had gone pale. Sarah, full of smug confidence seconds earlier, looked like she'd been hit with ice water. The woman, still holding the baby, stared Daniel down, her eyes burning. "You thought you could just disappear," she said, voice sharp. "You ignore my calls, skip out on the court notices, and now here you are, helping your sister play bride in someone else's wedding dress." I felt like I was outside my own body. I turned to Daniel. My voice came out eerily calm. "You have a He swallowed, eyes flicking to Sarah like she might somehow save him. Sarah, still in my dress, stiffened. Then, sounding both defensive and desperate, she blurted, "She's lying." The woman, Natalie, as I would later learn, let out a bitter laugh. She adjusted the baby again, who let out a soft coo. "Right," Natalie said, pulling out her phone. "Let's take a look at the so-called lies I've been texting for months." She tapped the screen and held it out. Message after message. "Natalie, Daniel, you need to talk to me. Natalie, we need to arrange support before the court gets involved. Natalie, she's sick, and I can't reach you. You need to step up. Natalie, if you don't at least tell your fiancé before the wedding, I will." My stomach turned. Sarah lunged toward the phone, trying to knock it from her hand. "That doesn't prove anything," she snapped. "Anyone can fake messages. Are you serious right now?" Natalie said, stepping back, eyes locked on Sarah. "You knew." That's when I noticed the way Sarah was standing, slightly in front of Daniel, body turned toward him, almost protectively. And Daniel wasn't denying anything. A horrible thought slithered into my mind. "How long have you known?" I asked, barely a whisper. Sarah didn't answer, and that told me everything. She had known. The entire time. Not only had she kept it from me, she'd encouraged him to hide it. My own fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry, the man who let his sister wear my dress like she was the bride. The rage rising inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. But before I could say a word, Natalie spoke again. "You really think I came here just to warn her?" she said, tilting her head. A slow smile crept across her lips. "I came here to make sure she saw." She pulled out another document, this one from the court. Before I could process it, she tossed it onto the nearby table. I stepped forward, hands trembling, and picked it up. It was a paternity order, a legal document stating Daniel was the father, that he had already been ordered to pay support, and that if he refused, his wages could be garnished. His assets, seized. I looked up at him, feeling like I was staring at a stranger. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew and still let me plan this wedding." Daniel finally spoke. I was gonna tell you when," I snapped. Before or after we walked down the aisle, Sarah, still wearing my dress, crossed her arms. "Oh, stop being dramatic," she scoffed. "People make mistakes." I stared at her, stunned. She wasn't angry at Daniel, not at the betrayal, the lies, the baby. She was angry at me, like I was the problem. Natalie let out a breath, shaking her head. "You know what? I don't even care about your wedding mess." She turned back to Daniel, eyes now ice cold. "I came here for one reason, to tell you that since you ignored the first court order," she said, leaning in slightly, "the court just approved my request for full custody." Daniel flinched. Sarah gasped, then snapped. "What the?" she shouted, stepping toward Natalie. "You can't do that. He has rights. You can't just take his child." Natalie raised a brow. "Oh, now you care." Sarah's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. I watched something shift in her expression. It cracked. She turned to Daniel, her eyes wide and desperate. "You're not gonna let her take your baby, right?" she whispered. And that was when it all clicked. Sarah wasn't just being competitive. She wasn't just trying to steal the spotlight, or being some overbearing sibling, with a strange obsession. She was in love with her own brother. Daniel didn't answer her right away. His face was unreadable, like he was realizing something for the first time. But Sarah snapped. She turned back to me, her expression twisted with anger. "This is all your fault," she spat. "If you weren't here, none of this would be happening." I nearly laughed. "You're blaming me for your brother's betrayal." But she didn't hear me. She was spiraling. "You ruined everything. You came into our family, and suddenly he stopped caring about what really mattered. You took him away from me." The boutique was dead silent. My mom was frozen. My friends looked like they were watching a horror movie unfold in real life. And Daniel took a slow step away from Sarah. Finally, something seemed to register. I looked between them, my stomach turning. I never took him from you, I said slowly. He's not yours to take. Sarah's breath hitched. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then in a voice so full of venom it could burn, she whispered, he should have been. I stared at her. Daniel stared at her. Even Natalie stared at her. And then before anyone could react, Sarah grabbed the front of the wedding dress and ripped it straight down the middle. The sound of tearing fabric rang out louder than it should have. My dress, my beautiful dress, was shredded. The delicate lace torn apart like it had never meant anything. Sarah stood there, chest heaving, hands still clutching the ruined fabric. Her expression was wild. No one moved. No one spoke. Then all at once, "Are you insane?" my mom shouted, her voice trembling with rage. My maid of honor gasped. My friends whispered frantically. The boutique assistant looked like she might faint, but I barely heard them, because all I could see was Sarah trembling, unhinged, standing in the wreckage of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Her hands were shaking. Her face was twisted, not just with anger, but with something deeper, something broken. Daniel was pale. He took another slow step away from her, his eyes locked on the shredded dress. It was like he was finally realizing just how far this had gone. Then Sarah turned to me. "This was supposed to be mine," she whispered. There was something in her voice, something that made the hairs on my arms rise. "Not just the dress," she continued. "Not just the wedding. Everything." I stared. "What are you talking about?" Her lips trembled, her face twisted in pain. Then something inside her snapped. She whirled on Daniel. "You loved me first." My stomach dropped. The entire room froze. Sarah's breathing was ragged. Her eyes flicked between me and Daniel. "I was always there," she said, voice shaking. "I was the one who understood you. I stood by you. I knew everything about you." And then she showed up, and suddenly I didn't matter anymore. Daniel's face was completely blank. Then very quietly, "Sarah, I'm your brother." She flinched like he'd struck her. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head violently, as if she could erase the truth. "It doesn't have to be like that," she whispered. It wasn't always like that. We were so close before she ruined everything." She turned to me again, her eyes filled with pure burning hatred. I said, my voice oddly calm. The woman finally turned to look at me. "You didn't know, did you?" she said, laughing bitterly. "Of course not. He's been dodging me for weeks." She adjusted the baby in her arms. "This is your fiancé's child. She's 2 months old." I swear I stopped breathing. My ears started ringing. Daniel, my fiancé, had a child. A whole baby. And Sarah knew. That's why she had been acting so smug. That's why she had been so controlling lately. Because she thought somehow she'd won. The room felt like it had been struck by lightning. No one moved. No one spoke. Daniel's face had drained of all color. Sarah, who had been brimming with smug confidence just seconds ago, looked like she'd been slapped. The woman, still holding Daniel's child, stared him down. Her eyes were burning. "You thought you could just disappear," "You don't answer my calls, you ignore court summons, and now you're here playing house, helping your sister play bride in someone else's wedding dress." I felt like I was floating outside my own body. I turned to Daniel. My voice came out eerily calm. "You have a child." He swallowed, eyes darting to Sarah like she could somehow save him. Sarah, still in my dress, stiffened. Then in a voice both defensive and desperate, she blurted, "She's lying." "Right." The woman, Natalie, I would later learn, laughed bitterly. She shifted the baby in her arm. The tiny thing let out a soft coo. "Let's see what lies I've been texting you about for months," Natalie said, pulling out her phone. She tapped her screen, then turned it around to show a string of messages. "Daniel, you need to talk to me. We need to set up child support before the court orders it. She's sick and I can't get a hold of you. You need to be a father. I swear to God, if you don't tell your fiancé before she marries you, I will." My stomach turned. Sarah lunged at the phone, trying to knock it out of her hand. "That doesn't prove anything," she snapped. "Anyone can fake messages." "Are you serious right now?" Natalie hissed, stepping back. And that's when I noticed it. The way Sarah was standing slightly in front of Daniel, her body turned toward him like she was guarding him. And Daniel, he wasn't arguing, wasn't protesting, wasn't denying a thing. A horrible thought crawled into my mind. "How long have you known?" I asked Sarah. my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. That told me everything. She had known, the whole time. And not only had she kept it from me, she had helped him hide it, encouraged him, covered for him, my own fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry, the man who let his sister try on my dress like she was the bride. The rage bubbling up inside me was like nothing I'd ever felt. But before I could speak, Natalie's voice cut through the tension. You really think I came here just to warn her? She asked, tilting her head, lips curling into a smile. I came here to make sure she saw this. She pulled out a piece of paper. I barely had time to process before she tossed it onto the table. I stepped forward, hands shaking as I picked it up. It was a paternity order, a legal document stating that Daniel was the father, that he had already been ordered to pay child support, that if he refused, his wages would be garnished and his assets seized. You knew, I whispered, looking up at him. You knew, and you let me plan a wedding with you anyway. Daniel finally spoke. I was going to tell you. When? I snapped. Before or after we walked down the aisle? Sarah, still in my dress, crossed her arms. Oh, stop being dramatic, she scoffed. People make mistakes. I stared at her in disbelief. She wasn't angry at Daniel, not angry about the cheating, not about the baby. She was angry at me. Natalie shook her head. You know what? I don't even care about your wedding drama. She turned to Daniel, her voice ice cold. I came here for one reason, to let you know that since you ignored the first order. She leaned in. The court just approved my request for full custody. Daniel flinched. Sarah gasped. You can't do that, she shrieked, stepping toward Natalie. He has rights. You're not taking his child away. Natalie raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you care. Sarah was trembling, all over. Something cracked in her expression. She turned to Daniel, eyes wide and desperate. You're not going to let her take your baby, right? She whispered. And that's when it clicked. Sarah wasn't just competitive. She wasn't just attention-seeking. She wasn't just controlling. She was in love with her brother. Daniel's face twisted like he was realizing something awful for the first time. But Sarah, she snapped. She turned back to me, furious. This is all your fault, she screamed. If you weren't here, none of this would be happening. You're blaming me for your brother's cheat. She didn't hear me. She was spiraling. You ruined everything. You came into our family and he stopped caring about what really mattered. You took him away from me. The boutique was dead silent. My mother was frozen. My friends looked horrified. Daniel took a slow step away from Sarah. I never took him from you, I said quietly. He's not yours to take. Her breath hitched. Her hands clenched. He should have been. I stared at her. So did Daniel. So did Natalie. And then, before anyone could react, Sarah grabbed the front of the wedding dress and ripped it straight down the middle. The sound of the fabric tearing was deafening. My dress, my beautiful delicate dress, ruined. Sarah stood there, hands still gripping the shredded lace, chest heaved. No one moved. Then, are you insane? My mom shouted. My maid of honor gasped. My friends whispered. The boutique assistant looked ready to faint. But I could only look at Sarah. She looked broken. Daniel was pale. He took another step away. This was supposed to be mine, Sarah whispered. Not just the dress, she said. Not just the wedding. Everything. What are you talking about? You loved me first, she cried, turning to Daniel. My stomach dropped. I was always there, she continued, voice trembling. I knew you. I supported you. And then she showed up and suddenly I didn't matter anymore. Daniel's face was blank. Then finally, quietly he said, Sarah, I'm your brother. She flinched. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head violently. It doesn't have to be like that, she whispered. It wasn't always like that. Daniel said nothing. That silence, that was the final crack. She sobbed, shoved past everyone, and ran out of the boutique. I never saw her again. Everything collapsed after that. Daniel tried to apologize. He begged me to listen, but I was done. I took off my engagement ring, put it in his hand and walked out. I wish I could say they both vanished from my life, but life doesn't work like that. Sarah moved. Don't know where. Don't care. Daniel tried to reach out. Calls, texts, even showing up at my mom's. I never responded. He finally started therapy, I heard. Good for him. Natalie, though, she became a friend. We stayed in touch. She got every penny of child support she was owed. She moved on, found someone who cared about her and her daughter. And me, I healed. I traveled. I focused on myself. One day I'll get married, but not to someone like Daniel, not to someone who lets his sister walk all over me, and definitely not in a dress from that cursed boutique. Looking back, I should have seen the signs, but sometimes love makes you blind. Not anymore. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that when people show you who they are, believe them the first time.